In a small, unassuming courtroom in Florida, the air was thick with anticipation. The room buzzed with murmurs as people craned their necks to catch a glimpse of the two figures at the center of the unfolding drama. Clint Eastwood, the legendary actor and director whose name was synonymous with grit and determination, and Pam Bondi, the former Attorney General of Florida, known for her sharp legal mind and unrelenting confidence. Though Bondi had stepped away from public office, she had returned to the spotlight as Eastwood's defense attorney in what seemed like a minor case at first glance. But nothing about this trial would turn out to be ordinary. The charges against Eastwood were peculiar, almost comical if they weren't being taken so seriously by the prosecution. He was accused of trespassing on private property near his coastal estate, while filming scenes for an upcoming movie project without obtaining the proper permits. Additionally, he faced allegations of disturbing the peace, claims that stemmed from complaints by local residents who said his presence disrupted their quiet lives. On paper, it sounded like a straightforward case, perhaps even one that could be resolved with a slap on the wrist or a small fine. But as the days leading up to the trial unfolded, it became clear that this wasn't just any other court battle. Local media outlets seized on the story, turning it into a national spectacle. Headlines screamed about Clint Eastwood's legal troubles and speculated wildly about why such a beloved figure was being targeted. Some commentators suggested it was a simple misunderstanding, blown out of proportion. Others hinted at deeper motives, pointing fingers at overzealous prosecutors eager to make a name for themselves by going after a celebrity. Meanwhile, Eastwood's fans rallied behind him, flooding social media with messages of support and calling the charges ridiculous. Inside the courtroom, the scene was no less chaotic. Reporters jostled for seats in the gallery, cameras clicking furiously as Eastwood entered the room. Dressed in a crisp suit, he carried himself with the same quiet authority that had made him a cinematic icon. His piercing gaze scanned the room before settling on Bondi, who stood beside him, radiating calm assurance. If anyone doubted her ability to handle this case, those doubts evaporated the moment she began speaking. Her voice was steady, her words precise, and her demeanor commanded respect. It was clear she wasn't just here to defend Eastwood, she was here to win. The prosecution, led by a young but ambitious district attorney, wasted no time laying out their case. They painted Eastwood as reckless and dismissive of local laws, portraying him as someone who believed his fame gave him the right to do whatever he pleased. Witnesses took the stand, recounting how Eastwood and his crew had descended upon their peaceful neighborhood, disrupting routines and causing chaos. One elderly woman tearfully described how she felt trapped in her own home during the filming, unable to leave because of the equipment blocking her driveway. Another witness claimed Eastwood had ignored repeated requests to stop filming and leave the area. Each testimony added another layer of complexity to the case, leaving the jury and the audience wondering whether there was more to the story than met the eye. As the prosecution wrapped up their opening arguments, the mood in the courtroom shifted. What had started as a seemingly open and shut case now felt murkier, with both sides presenting compelling narratives. The prosecution's portrayal of Eastwood as a rule-breaker clashed sharply with the image of the stoic, principled man many had come to admire through his films. For his part, Eastwood remained impassive, listening intently, but betraying little emotion. Bondi, however, was a different story. She leaned forward slightly in her seat, her eyes narrowing as she absorbed every word. There was something about the way she held herself, a subtle tension in her posture, that hinted she was preparing for something big. And then, just as the prosecution seemed to be gaining momentum, Bondi made her move. It wasn't flashy or dramatic, at least not yet, but it sent ripples through the courtroom. During a brief recess, she huddled with Eastwood and her team, scribbling notes and whispering urgently. When the session resumed, she requested permission to call a witness whose name no one had anticipated hearing. The courtroom fell silent as Bondi announced the identity of this surprise witness, the presiding judge's estranged brother, a respected expert in environmental law. Gasps rippled through the gallery, and even the judge looked startled, his face momentarily pale. What followed was a whirlwind of confusion and intrigue. Bondi explained that the witness could provide crucial context about the land where the alleged trespassing occurred, including its zoning regulations and environmental protections. But more importantly, she raised questions about whether the judge could remain impartial given his personal connection to the witness. The prosecution immediately objected, accusing Bondi of attempting to manipulate the proceedings. Yet Bondi stood firm, arguing that justice required transparency and fairness above all else. By the end of the day, the courtroom was abuzz with speculation. Reporters typed furiously on their laptops, trying to piece together the implications of Bondi's bold gambit. Outside, crowds gathered, holding signs and chanting slogans in support of Eastwood. Social media exploded with memes and hashtags, turning the trial into a cultural phenomenon. And through it all, Bondi remained unfazed, her expression unreadable, but her resolve unwavering. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain. Pam Bondi had turned what appeared to be a minor legal dispute into a high-stakes showdown, and the world was watching. The courtroom was electric with tension as Pam Bondi rose to her feet, her presence commanding the attention of everyone in the room. The shockwaves from her surprise witness announcement had barely settled when she began laying out her case, with surgical precision. Her voice was calm but carried an unmistakable edge, like a blade carefully slicing through layers of doubt and confusion. She didn't just want to defend Clint Eastwood, she wanted to dismantle the prosecution's narrative entirely. Bondi started by addressing the elephant in the room, the unexpected appearance of the judge's estranged brother as a potential witness. She explained that this wasn't a random choice or a desperate attempt to disrupt the trial. Instead, it was a calculated move based on thorough research and legal strategy. The brother, whose name was Michael Carter, was an expert in environmental law, a field directly relevant to the land where Eastwood allegedly trespassed. Bondi argued that understanding the nuances of zoning laws, conservation efforts, and property rights was essential to determining whether Eastwood had actually broken any rules. By bringing Carter into the mix, she aimed to shed light on aspects of the case that the prosecution had conveniently overlooked. The prosecution team, however, was not about to let Bondi take control without a fight. Their lead attorney, a young but ambitious district attorney named Rachel Meyer, immediately stood up to object. "Your Honor," she said, her tone sharp and accusatory, "this is nothing more than a transparent attempt to undermine the integrity of these proceedings. The defense has no real evidence tying Mr. Carter's expertise to this case, and they are using his familial connection to cast doubt on your impartiality." Meyer's words hung heavy in the air, and for a brief moment all eyes turned to the judge, who sat stiffly at the bench, his expression unreadable. Bondi didn't flinch. With a composed smile, she countered, "If there is even the slightest possibility of bias in this courtroom, we have a duty to address it. Justice must be seen to be done, Your Honor. My client deserves a fair trial, free from any perception of favoritism or prejudice." Her argument struck a chord, not just with the judge, but also with the jury, who exchanged thoughtful glances. It was clear that Bondi had struck a nerve, forcing everyone to confront uncomfortable questions about fairness and transparency. As the debate raged on, the atmosphere in the courtroom grew increasingly tense. Reporters scribbled furiously in their notebooks, capturing every word and gesture. Cameras clicked incessantly, capturing the drama unfolding before them. Outside the courthouse, crowds gathered, holding signs and chanting slogans. Some supported Eastwood, while others criticized what they saw as preferential treatment for the rich and famous. Social media was ablaze with memes and hashtags, turning the trial into a cultural phenomenon. Memes comparing the situation to one of Eastwood's iconic Western films flooded timelines with captions like "Go ahead, make my day," and "Dirty Harry meets dirty politics." Back inside, the focus shifted back to Michael Carter. Though he hadn't yet taken the stand, his mere mention had already changed the trajectory of the trial. Bondi skillfully used the uncertainty surrounding his involvement to plant seeds of doubt in the minds of the jurors. She highlighted inconsistencies in the prosecution's arguments, pointing out that the land in question had a complicated history involving multiple ownership changes, zoning disputes, and environmental regulations. How could anyone claim Eastwood knowingly violated the law when the rules themselves were so murky? To drive her point home, Bondi presented documents showing that Eastwood's production team had made repeated attempts to secure the necessary permits before filming. Emails and letters proved that they had reached out to local authorities, only to receive vague or contradictory responses. Bondi argued that Eastwood and his crew had acted in good faith, relying on assurances from officials who later claimed they had never given permission. This revelation cast the prosecution's narrative in a new light, suggesting that the charges might not have been about enforcing the law, but rather about targeting Eastwood specifically. Meanwhile, Eastwood himself remained a picture of stoic composure. He sat quietly beside Bondi, occasionally jotting down notes or whispering something to her. His demeanor was calm, almost detached, as if he were observing the chaos around him from a great distance. Yet those who knew him well could see the flicker of determination in his eyes. He wasn't just sitting idly by. He was fully engaged, trusting Bondi to guide him through the storm. The prosecution, sensing that they were losing ground, tried to regain momentum by focusing on the emotional impact of Eastwood's actions on the local community. They called additional witnesses, including neighbors who described feeling invaded by the sudden influx of film crews and equipment. One woman tearfully recounted how her daily routine had been disrupted, leaving her unable to tend to her garden or walk her dog peacefully. Another man complained about noise levels, saying he couldn't sleep for days due to generators running late into the night. But Bondi was ready for them. As each witness testified, she meticulously cross-examined them, exposing holes in their stories and challenging their credibility. She pointed out that many of the complaints seemed exaggerated or inconsistent, raising questions about whether they were genuinely upset or simply seeking attention. When one witness admitted under questioning that he hadn't actually seen Eastwood himself during the alleged incident, Bondi pounced, asking, "Then how can you be sure it was Mr. Eastwood's actions causing your distress?" The courtroom erupted in murmurs, and the witness squirmed uncomfortably in the stand. By the end of the day, the tide had begun to turn. What had started as a straightforward case against Eastwood now felt far more complex, with shades of gray emerging where once there had been black and white. Bondi's strategic brilliance was undeniable, and her ability to adapt on the fly kept the prosecution scrambling to keep up. Even the judge, who had initially seemed irritated by the introduction of Michael Carter, appeared to soften slightly as Bondi continued to press her points with logic and clarity. Outside the courthouse, the story dominated headlines and conversations alike. Late-night talk show hosts joked about the trial, while political commentators debated whether it represented a broader issue of accountability for celebrities. For Eastwood's supporters, the case symbolized a clash between artistic freedom and bureaucratic overreach. For his critics, it was proof that wealth and fame could shield someone from consequences. Regardless of where people stood, one thing was certain. Pam Bondi had transformed what should have been a minor legal dispute into a high-stakes battle for justice, and the world couldn't look away. The courtroom drama reached a fever pitch as the judge, visibly uncomfortable under the weight of Pam Bondi's revelations, called for a recess to deliberate on the matter of his estranged brother's involvement. The room erupted into murmurs, as lawyers, reporters, and spectators speculated about what might happen next. Would the judge recuse himself? Could this trial possibly continue with the same level of impartiality that justice demanded? As the gavel struck and the court adjourned temporarily, all eyes turned toward the closed doors behind which critical decisions were being made. Outside the courtroom, chaos reigned. Reporters scrambled to get closer to anyone who might offer insight into the unfolding events. Microphones were thrust at Eastwood, who walked silently alongside Bondi, his face unreadable but his jaw set in determination. For her part, Bondi remained calm and composed, deflecting questions with polite smiles and vague assurances that justice would prevail. Her confidence was palpable, almost magnetic, drawing supporters and skeptics alike into her orbit. Social media exploded once again with hashtags like Bondi v System and Eastwood on trial trending worldwide. Memes comparing the situation to scenes from Dirty Harry or The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly flooded timelines, blending humor with biting commentary on the absurdity of the situation. Inside the courthouse, tension simmered. Prosecutors huddled, in private corners, whispering furiously as they strategized how to regain control of the narrative. Rachel Meyer, the lead prosecutor, paced anxiously, clearly frustrated by Bondi's ability to turn the tables so effectively. She had entered the trial expecting a straightforward victory, banking on public sentiment against celebrities flouting local laws. But Bondi's unexpected moves, first introducing the judge's estranged brother as a potential witness, then raising legitimate concerns about procedural fairness, had thrown everything off balance. Meyer knew she needed to act fast if she wanted to salvage any semblance of credibility for her case. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, the judge faced an agonizing dilemma. His estranged brother, Michael Carter, hadn't seen him in years, let alone interacted professionally. Yet here he was, suddenly thrust into the spotlight as a key figure in one of the most high-profile trials of the year. The judge wrestled with conflicting emotions: pride that his brother was recognized as an expert in environmental law, guilt over their fractured relationship, and frustration at finding himself entangled in a legal quagmire. He understood Bondi's argument that even the appearance of bias could undermine the integrity of the proceedings, but accepting it meant stepping down from presiding over the case. Recusal would not only be a personal blow but also risk further delays and complications. As these deliberations continued, Bondi seized the opportunity to fortify her defense strategy. Back in the courtroom, she met privately with Clint Eastwood and her team, reviewing documents and preparing for every possible outcome. Eastwood listened intently, occasionally nodding or interjecting with sharp observations. Despite the mounting pressure, he exuded the same quiet strength that had defined his career both on-screen and off. To those watching closely, it was clear that Eastwood trusted Bondi implicitly, allowing her to steer the ship while he remained steady at its helm. When the session resumed, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. The judge returned to the bench, his expression somber but resolute. After a brief pause, he addressed the courtroom. After careful consideration, he began, his voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. I have decided to recuse myself from this case due to the potential conflict of interest involving my brother, Michael Carter. Gasps rippled through the gallery as reporters scrambled to document the historic decision. It wasn't often that a sitting judge stepped aside mid-trial, especially in such a high-stakes scenario. The prosecution team exchanged uneasy glances, realizing the implications of this development. With the original judge now out of the picture, a replacement would need to be appointed, a process that could delay the trial significantly. More importantly, the new judge might approach the case with fresh eyes, potentially viewing Bondi's arguments in a more favorable light. For Meyer and her colleagues, this was a devastating setback. They had built their case around specific interpretations of the law and the assumption of continuity in judicial oversight. Now, everything was up in the air. Bondi, however, remained unfazed. If anything, the judge's recusal validated her earlier claims about the importance of fairness and transparency. She wasted no time capitalizing on the shift in momentum. Addressing the newly assigned judge, a seasoned jurist named Margaret Hayes, Bondi reiterated her core arguments, emphasizing the ambiguities surrounding the land's zoning regulations and the lack of clear communication from local authorities. She also highlighted the disproportionate nature of the charges against Eastwood, suggesting that the prosecution's aggressive stance stemmed less from concern for justice and more from political motivations. Hayes, known for her no-nonsense demeanor and commitment to impartiality, listened attentively. Unlike her predecessor, she asked pointed questions, challenging both sides to clarify their positions. When Meyer attempted to argue that Eastwood's fame made him a target for accountability, Hayes interrupted sharply. Fame does not exempt someone from responsibility, she said, but neither should it subject them to undue scrutiny. Let's stick to the facts here. Her words sent a clear message. This trial would proceed based on evidence, not emotion. As the day wore on, Bondi continued to press her advantage. She introduced additional witnesses, including local residents who testified that Eastwood's presence hadn't caused significant disruption. One elderly man described how Eastwood had personally apologized for any inconvenience and even offered to help repair damage caused by the film crew's equipment. Another neighbor praised Eastwood's generosity, recounting how he donated funds to improve nearby park facilities after learning about budget cuts. These testimonies painted a starkly different picture from the one presented by the prosecution, humanizing Eastwood and casting doubt on the severity of the charges. By the end of the session, the courtroom felt like a battlefield where two opposing forces had clashed fiercely, and Bondi appeared to be gaining the upper hand. The prosecution's narrative, once so compelling, now seemed shaky and overly dramatic. Even some members of the jury exchanged skeptical looks, their expressions suggesting they were beginning to question whether Eastwood truly deserved the harsh treatment he was receiving. Outside, the story continued to captivate the nation. Late night, comedians joked about the trial's twists and turns, while political analysts debated whether it reflected broader issues of celebrity privilege versus systemic accountability. Supporters of Eastwood organized rallies, holding signs that read, "Artists deserve freedom and justice over jealousy." Critics, meanwhile, accused Bondi of exploiting technicalities to protect a wealthy client, arguing that ordinary citizens wouldn't receive the same leniency. Through it all, Clint Eastwood remained enigmatic, embodying the stoic hero archetype that had defined his career. He didn't engage in public disputes or fiery rebuttals. Instead, he let his actions, and Bondi's eloquent defense, speak for themselves. Together, they formed a formidable duo, navigating the complexities of the legal system with grace and grit. As the sun set on another day of drama, one thing was certain. Pam Bondi had transformed what could have been a routine trespassing case into a riveting saga of wit, strategy, and resilience. And though the trial was far from over, the momentum had unmistakably shifted in Eastwood's favor. The world watched eagerly, wondering what surprises Bondi might unleash next, and whether justice would ultimately prevail. The courtroom was alive with anticipation as Judge Margaret Hayes took charge, her presence commanding instant respect. Unlike the previous judge, who had recused himself amid controversy, Hayes radiated authority and precision. She wasted no time diving into the heart of the matter, making it clear that she intended to move the trial forward with efficiency and fairness. Her first order of business was addressing the lingering issue of Michael Carter, the estranged brother of the former judge and an expert in environmental law. While his involvement had been the catalyst for the earlier chaos, Hayes made it abundantly clear that his testimony would only be considered if it directly pertained to the facts of the case. Pam Bondi, ever the strategist, seized this opportunity to pivot her defense. She argued that Carter's expertise was not just relevant, but essential to understanding the complexities of the land where Clint Eastwood allegedly trespassed. She presented documents showing that the property in question had a tangled history involving multiple zoning changes, conservation efforts, and disputes over ownership. According to Bondi, these factors created a gray area that even seasoned legal experts might struggle to navigate, let alone a filmmaker simply trying to do his job. "Your Honor," Bondi said, her voice calm but firm, "this isn't about excusing Mr. Eastwood's actions. It's about ensuring that we have all the information necessary to make an informed decision. Ignoring these details would be a disservice to justice." The prosecution, led by Rachel Meyer, pushed back fiercely. Meyer argued that introducing Carter's testimony at this stage would only serve to complicate matters further and delay the trial unnecessarily. "We're here to determine whether Mr. Eastwood violated local laws, not to debate the intricacies of environmental regulations," she snapped, clearly frustrated by Bondi's relentless maneuvering. But Hayes, unfazed by the tension between the two attorneys, ruled that Carter could testify, but only on specific points related to the land's zoning status and whether Eastwood's activities fell within permissible limits. With that ruling, The trial entered a new phase, one marked by technicalities and intricate legal arguments. Carter, now officially called to the stand, proved to be a compelling witness. Dressed in a sharp suit and speaking with the confidence of someone who had spent decades mastering his field, he explained the nuances of the property's zoning laws in terms that were accessible yet authoritative. He revealed that the land had undergone several rezoning processes in recent years, leaving its legal status ambiguous. Furthermore, he pointed out that local authorities themselves had struggled to enforce consistent rules due to overlapping jurisdictions and outdated regulations. Bondi leaned heavily on Carter's testimony, using it to cast doubt on the prosecution's claims. She argued that Eastwood couldn't reasonably be expected to navigate such a convoluted system without clear guidance. To reinforce her point, she introduced emails and letters showing that Eastwood's production team had repeatedly sought clarification from local officials before filming began. In one particularly damning exchange, a county official appeared to give verbal approval for the project, only to later deny ever doing so. Bondi held up this contradiction as evidence of miscommunication rather than malicious intent. If the people responsible for enforcing the law can't agree on what's allowed, she asked rhetorically, how can we hold Mr. Eastwood accountable? Meyer, sensing that the prosecution's case was unraveling, tried to shift focus back to the emotional impact of Eastwood's actions on the community. She called additional witnesses, including residents who described feeling invaded by the sudden influx of film crews and equipment. One woman tearfully recounted how her peaceful morning routine had been disrupted by loud generators and bright lights. Another man complained that his children were frightened by the commotion, forcing him to keep them indoors during filming. These testimonies painted a vivid picture of disruption, but Bondi was quick to counter each claim with meticulous cross-examination. When the woman describing her disrupted routine admitted under questioning that she lived nearly half a mile away from the filming site, Bondi seized the moment. Ma'am, you stated earlier that the noise prevented you from enjoying your garden. Can you explain how sound traveled so far without fading? The woman hesitated, visibly flustered before admitting that she hadn't actually measured the distance or decibel levels. Similarly, when the man claiming his children were scared admitted they hadn't seen the film crew directly, but had merely heard about it from neighbors, Bondi highlighted the hearsay nature of his testimony. By the end of her cross-examinations, many of the prosecution's witnesses seemed less credible, their stories riddled with inconsistencies. Meanwhile, Eastwood remained a quiet but steady presence throughout the proceedings. Though he rarely spoke, his demeanor spoke volumes. He sat upright in his chair, listening intently to every word, occasionally jotting down notes or whispering something to Bondi. His calmness contrasted sharply with the growing frustration of the prosecution team, who found themselves increasingly boxed in by Bondi's relentless logic and preparation. Even Judge Hayes seemed impressed by Bondi's ability to stay several steps ahead, often nodding approvingly as she presented her arguments. Outside the courtroom, public opinion continued to sway dramatically. Supporters of Eastwood organized rallies holding signs that read "Artists need freedom" and "Justice over politics." They argued that the charges against him were exaggerated and politically motivated, pointing to the lack of similar crackdowns on other filmmakers who had worked in the area. Critics, however, accused Bondi of exploiting loopholes to protect a wealthy client, insisting that ordinary citizens wouldn't receive the same level of leniency. Social media buzzed with memes and commentary, turning the trial into a cultural touchstone. Late-night talk show hosts joked about the absurdity of the situation, while political analysts debated whether it reflected broader issues of celebrity privilege versus systemic accountability. Back inside the courtroom, tensions reached a boiling point during closing arguments. Meyer delivered a passionate plea, urging the jury to see Eastwood's actions as symptomatic of a larger problem, the belief among some celebrities that they are above the law. Mr. Eastwood is a great filmmaker, yes? She said, her voice rising with emotion. But greatness doesn't grant immunity. If we let him walk away without consequences, what message does that send to others who might think they can break the rules with impunity? Bondi, however, was ready with a rebuttal. Rising to her feet, she addressed the jury with a mixture of conviction and empathy. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her tone measured but powerful. "This case isn't about fame or privilege. It's about fairness. My client acted in good faith, relying on assurances from local authorities and navigating a system that even experts find confusing. To punish him for mistakes made by others would be unjust. Let us not confuse accountability with scapegoating." Her words resonated deeply, not just with the jury but also with everyone watching. As she concluded her argument, a hush fell over the courtroom. The stakes had never felt higher, and the outcome hung precariously in the balance. For Eastwood, this wasn't just about avoiding penalties. It was about proving that he had done nothing wrong. For Bondi, it was about vindicating her strategy and demonstrating that justice could prevail even in the face of adversity. As the trial moved toward its final stages, the world waited with bated breath. Would the jury side with the prosecution, delivering a verdict that reinforced the idea that no one is above the law? Or would they agree with Bondi, recognizing the ambiguities and inconsistencies that had clouded the case from the start? Whatever the decision, one thing was certain. Pam Bondi had turned a seemingly minor legal dispute into a landmark battle for fairness, and the world couldn't look away. The courtroom was eerily quiet as the jury filed back in after hours of deliberation. Every eye in the room was fixed on them, searching for any hint of what their verdict might be. The tension was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. For Clint Eastwood, this moment represented the culmination of weeks of legal battles, public scrutiny, and personal reflection. For Pam Bondi, it was the ultimate test of her strategy and skill, her chance to prove that justice could triumph, even in the most complex and high-stakes scenarios. As the foreperson stood to deliver the verdict, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. "Ladies and gentlemen of the court," the foreperson began, their voice steady but tinged with gravity. "After careful consideration of the evidence presented, we find the defendant, Mr. Clint Eastwood, not guilty on all charges." The words hit like a thunderclap, reverberating through the courtroom and sending shockwaves of emotion rippling across the room. Eastwood's supporters erupted into cheers, while his critics sat in stunned silence. Reporters scrambled to capture the moment, their cameras flashing wildly as Eastwood exchanged a brief, meaningful glance with Bondi. It was a look of mutual respect and relief, a silent acknowledgement of the hard-fought battle they had just won. Judge Margaret Hayes wasted no time in formalizing the decision. With a firm strike of her gavel, she dismissed the charges against Eastwood, emphasizing that the ruling was based on the lack of clear evidence and the ambiguities surrounding the property's zoning laws. "The law must be applied fairly and consistently," she declared, her tone leaving no room for misinterpretation. "In this case, the prosecution failed to meet the burden of proof required to establish guilt beyond a reasonable doubt." Her words were met with nods of approval from the defense team and murmurs of discontent from the prosecution, who clearly felt blindsided by the outcome. Rachel Meyer, the lead prosecutor, looked visibly deflated as she gathered her papers. Though she maintained her composure, there was no mistaking the frustration etched on her face. She had entered the trial confident in her case, only to see it dismantled piece by Bondi's relentless tactics. As she exited the courtroom, trailed by her team, reporters shouted questions about whether the state planned to appeal the decision. Meyer offered only a terse response. "We respect the jury's verdict and will review our options moving forward." It was a diplomatic answer, but one that did little to mask the sting of defeat. Bondi, meanwhile, exuded quiet satisfaction. Standing beside Eastwood, she addressed the media outside the courthouse, her voice calm but triumphant. "Today's verdict reaffirms the principle that justice must be fair and impartial," she said, her words carefully chosen to emphasize the broader implications of the case. "My client acted in good faith, navigating a system that is often confusing and inconsistent. To punish him for circumstances beyond his control would have been unjust. This outcome proves that accountability and fairness can coexist." Eastwood, ever the stoic figure, let Bondi take center stage during the press conference. He stood slightly behind her, his hands in his pockets, wearing an expression that was equal parts gratitude and resolve. When asked for his thoughts, he stepped forward briefly, tipping his hat to the crowd. "A man's got to do what a man's got to do," he said simply, a phrase that instantly resonated with his fans and echoed the themes of resilience and integrity that defined his career. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving the reporters clamoring for more. As news of the verdict spread, reactions poured in from all corners of the world. Supporters hailed the decision as a victory for artistic freedom and common sense, arguing that Eastwood had been unfairly targeted due to his celebrity status. Social media lit up with hashtags like March Justice for Clint and Bondi Wins Again, celebrating Bondi's strategic brilliance and Eastwood's vindication. Memes comparing the trial to one of Eastwood's iconic films flooded timelines with captions like, "Go ahead, make my day," and "The Good, the Bad, and the Jury." Late-night talk show hosts joked about the twists and turns of the case, turning it into comedic gold while acknowledging the underlying seriousness of the issues at play. Critics, however, were quick to voice their dissatisfaction. Some accused Bondi of exploiting technicalities to protect a wealthy client, insisting that ordinary citizens wouldn't have received the same leniency. Others argued that the verdict set a dangerous precedent, suggesting that celebrities could avoid consequences by hiring top-tier legal representation. Political analysts weighed in as well, debating whether the case highlighted systemic flaws in how laws are enforced or simply underscored the challenges of balancing public sentiment with legal principles. Amid the whirlwind of reactions, Bondi dropped a bombshell during a follow-up interview with a major news network. When asked about the motivations behind the prosecution's aggressive stance, she revealed that internal documents suggested the charges against Eastwood may have been politically driven. According to Bondi, local officials had faced mounting pressure from environmental groups and community activists to crack down on development projects near protected areas. Eastwood's film project, which involved temporary use of the land, became an easy target, a high-profile scalp that could placate critics without addressing deeper structural issues. While Bondi stopped short of accusing anyone directly, her comments ignited a firestorm of speculation and outrage. The revelation added yet another layer of complexity to an already convoluted saga. Critics of the prosecution seized on Bondi's claims, pointing to them as proof that Eastwood had been scapegoated for political gain. Supporters of the prosecution dismissed the allegations as sour grapes, arguing that Bondi was merely trying to deflect attention from the weaknesses in her own case. Meanwhile, calls for investigations into potential misconduct grew louder, with some lawmakers demanding transparency about the decision-making process that led to Eastwood's arrest. For Eastwood, the aftermath of the trial brought a mix of relief and reflection. Though he avoided jail time and financial penalties, the ordeal left a lasting impression on him. In interviews conducted weeks later, he admitted that the experience had forced him to confront uncomfortable truths about fame, privilege, and the complexities of navigating life in the public eye. "It's easy to think you're untouchable when you've been around as long as I have," he said candidly. "But this case reminded me that nobody is above the system. Not really. You still got to play by the rules, even if those rules don't always make sense." Bondi, too, reflected on the lessons learned from the trial. Speaking at a legal symposium shortly after the verdict, she emphasized the importance of diligence, preparation, and unwavering commitment to justice. "Every case is different," she told the audience, "but the principles remain the same. You have to fight for what's right no matter how tough the odds. And sometimes, you have to remind people that fairness isn't just a concept, it's a responsibility." As the dust settled and life returned to normal for Eastwood, the trial continued to resonate far beyond the courtroom. It sparked conversations about everything from environmental regulations to the treatment of celebrities in the justice system. For many, it served as a reminder of the delicate balance between enforcing laws and ensuring fairness. For others, it was a testament to the power of strategic thinking and perseverance in the face of adversity. In the end, the story of Clint Eastwood's surprising brush with the law and Pam Bondi's masterful defense became more than just a courtroom drama. It became a symbol of resilience, a lesson in the complexities of justice, and a testament to the enduring allure of a Hollywood legend who refused to back down, even when the odds were stacked against him. The aftermath of the trial rippled far beyond the confines of the Florida courtroom, leaving an indelible mark on everyone involved, and on society at large. For Clint Eastwood, the verdict was more than just a legal victory. It was a reaffirmation of his belief in standing firm against injustice, no matter how daunting the challenge. The experience had been grueling, forcing him to confront questions about privilege, accountability, and the often blurry line between personal responsibility and systemic failure. Yet as he walked out of the courthouse that day, flanked by Pam Bondi and greeted by throngs of cheering supporters, there was a quiet dignity in his demeanor, a reminder that even legends are human, and resilience is earned, not given. In the weeks following the trial, Eastwood retreated to his coastal estate seeking solace in the tranquility of nature. But his mind remained restless, replaying the events of the past months. He couldn't shake the feeling that something larger was at play here, that his case wasn't just about trespassing or permits, but about power dynamics and public perception. During long walks along the shoreline, he found himself reflecting on the complexities of fame. On one hand, it afforded him opportunities others could only dream of. On the other, it made him a target for criticism and scrutiny. The trial had underscored this duality, leaving him with a newfound appreciation for humility and gratitude. Eastwood channeled these reflections into his work, using the ordeal as inspiration for his next film project. Titled Fair Play, the movie explored themes of justice, integrity, and the struggle to navigate a world where rules were often bent or broken depending on who you were. Drawing loosely from his own experiences, Eastwood crafted a story about an ordinary man caught in an extraordinary situation, a narrative that resonated deeply with audiences worldwide. Critics hailed Fair Play as one of Eastwood's most introspective works, praising its raw honesty and timeless relevance. At the film's premiere, Eastwood took the stage briefly to thank those who had supported him during the trial, dedicating the movie to anyone who's ever fought for what they believe is right. His words earned a standing ovation, cementing his status not just as a filmmaker but as a cultural icon. Meanwhile, Pam Bondi emerged from the trial as a hero to many. Her strategic brilliance and unwavering determination had not only secured Eastwood's acquittal, but also sparked national conversations about fairness in the legal system. Invitations poured in from universities, think tanks, and advocacy groups, eager to hear her insights on navigating high-stakes litigation. Bondi embraced the spotlight, delivering speeches and writing op-eds that challenged conventional thinking about justice and accountability. She argued passionately that the law should serve as a shield for the vulnerable, not a weapon wielded by the powerful. Her message struck a chord, earning her widespread acclaim and solidifying her reputation as one of the sharpest legal minds of her generation. But Bondi's journey didn't stop there. Inspired by the revelations she uncovered during the trial, she launched a nonprofit organization dedicated to reforming zoning laws and environmental regulations. Dubbed Clear Grounds Initiative, the group aimed to simplify convoluted policies, increase transparency, and ensure equitable treatment for all stakeholders, whether they were wealthy developers or everyday citizens. Bondi traveled across the country meeting with community leaders, policymakers, and activists to build momentum for her cause. Though the road ahead was fraught with challenges, she approached the task with the same tenacity that had defined her defense of Eastwood. Change doesn't happen overnight, she told supporters at a fundraising gala. But if we stay focused and refuse to give up, we can create a system that works for everyone. The prosecution team, led by Rachel Meyer, faced a different kind of reckoning. While Meyer maintained that her actions were motivated solely by a desire to uphold the law, the backlash from the trial forced her to confront uncomfortable truths about prosecutorial overreach and political pressure. Internal investigations revealed that higher-ups within the district attorney's office had indeed pushed for aggressive charges against Eastwood, hoping to appease vocal critics without fully considering the merits of the case. These findings tarnished the office's reputation and prompted calls for reforms to prevent similar situations in the future. Meyer, though initially resistant to self-reflection, eventually acknowledged the need for change. In interviews, she admitted that the trial had taught her valuable lessons about balance and perspective. "Winning isn't everything," she said candidly. "Sometimes doing the right thing means stepping back and letting fairness take precedence." Outside the courtroom, the trial continued to dominate headlines and spark debate. Late-night talk shows turned the saga into comedic fodder, while documentaries and podcasts dissected every twist and turn. Social media remained ablaze with commentary, with users sharing memes, opinions, and personal stories inspired by the case. Some saw it as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked authority, while others viewed it as a testament to the enduring power of perseverance and strategy. Regardless of their stance, people couldn't stop talking about it, a testament to the trial's impact on the collective consciousness. For the residents of the small Florida town where the alleged trespassing occurred, life slowly returned to normal. Many expressed mixed feelings about the outcome, torn between relief that the spectacle was over and lingering frustration about unresolved issues related to development and conservation. Community meetings became forums for airing grievances and brainstorming solutions, with some residents advocating for stricter enforcement of zoning laws and others pushing for greater flexibility to accommodate economic growth. Though tensions occasionally flared, there was a growing sense of unity as neighbors worked together to find common ground. As the months passed, the trial faded from the front pages, but never entirely disappeared from public memory. It became part of the cultural fabric, referenced in everything from political debates to casual conversations. For Eastwood, it reinforced his legacy as a symbol of resilience and defiance, a man who refused to back down, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. For Bondi, it marked the beginning of a new chapter, one defined by activism and advocacy. And for the countless individuals who followed the case, it served as a reminder of the importance of questioning assumptions, challenging injustices, and striving for a fairer, more equitable world. In the end, the story of Pam Bondi's surprise move and Clint Eastwood's shocking arrest was more than just a courtroom drama. It was a microcosm of broader societal struggles, a reflection of humanity's ongoing quest for truth and justice. It reminded us that even in the face of adversity, courage and determination can prevail, and that sometimes the most unlikely heroes emerge from the unlikeliest places. As Eastwood might say, tipping his hat with a wry smile, "A man's gotta do what a man's gotta do." And in doing so, he, and those around him, can inspire change that lasts far beyond the final gavel.